Hi, welcome to Republican Roundtable. I'm Diane Napper.
And I'm Jen Zielinski.
And I'm Max Reimer. So normally we've all been hosts of Republican Roundtable, and we've all been involved in politics in our own certain way over the past several years. We thought we'd switch it up a little bit today and actually have a little bit of a roundtable discussion about things we've heard, things we've been involved with, and the political scene in Minnesota as we see it both in the recent past and moving forward into the future. So with that, there's not really a bunch of set topics that we have to discuss, but I'm excited to be here with Jen and Diane to discuss politics in Minnesota. And I think with that, a good place to maybe start is we just finished up some elections here in Minnesota, and with varying degrees of success. I think you saw different places have, resounding success, and then even here in Bloomington, where we're shooting, have a little bit of moderate success. Diane, what were you kind of involved with or paying attention to this last election cycle?
The public safety issue in Minneapolis has been huge, and as we all know, with crime skyrocketing, carjackings up, everything that's transpired in the last few years has seemed to have gotten much, much worse. And so watching how the previous election had unfolded with our current DA, Mary Moriarty, and just watching this revolving door of criminality has just been very interesting that no one seems to want to do anything about it.
Right. So, Jen, is that kind of the same issue that you were paying attention to? Or
paying attention to that, and also ranked choice voting in Minnetonka, which unfortunately passed a second time. So sad to see that happening, especially all the work that Ellen put into trying to bring out the issue to light. And also paying attention to politics in Bloomington. All politics is local.
Amen. Yeah.
How about you?
Well, I think, after the 2022 cycle, it was I was heavily involved in quite a few races that cycle. And I think for me, it was like to watch Minnesota make, a certain decision. Pretty much across the board, it seemed like it was kind of a bloodbath here. And for me, I was like, man, you invest so heavily for so long that it's tough. I think I'm speaking for everyone at this point. Like, it's tough to not feel pessimistic, about the state. And do you guys feel that? Are you still kind of down for the fight, or like what's been your attitude, I guess, over the past few years?
I'm in Minnesota to fight, so my goal is to stay here and keep it up. But it does get you down when you see just voters making the same choices over and over again, or voters not turning out. I think we see that too.
I think that was a big issue for Republicans in the last cycle, was the number of people who just stayed home.
Right.
It would not have taken much, but if just a few more thousand people or 100,000 people had just gone to vote, that's all they had to do. So I don't know how we fix that in the future, because we're not going to win elections if we keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Right. One thing I'm fascinated by that you brought up, Diane, was like this public safety issue. And I think kind of the working theory was that things have gotten so bad in Minnesota and in Minneapolis in particular that would prompt people, to make a different choice or kind of shake people loose from complacency. I think, I'd be interested to get your observation. I know you're heavily involved and Sean, your husband, is heavily involved with the Minneapolis GOP. It just seemed to me that it didn't move people to our side, the way that I thought it might.
And I don't understand that. I don't quite know why that happened. And one of the interesting things about Minneapolis in particular was the number of Democratic socialists running for city council just recently.
It's a move to the left, like
far left.
Well, that was a fascinating thing, right? Yeah. Because you had Andrea Jenkins, one of the city council seats in Minneapolis, who was on the stage for a defund the police rally in 2020. We forget that, but it seemed like, and Andrea Jenkins is transgender, and it's like, well, she was painted as this mega Republican and almost got primaried to the left.
Yes.
I mean, it's lunacy. She won by less than 100 votes or something like that.
And I would think it would be her year to, win again and just hold that council member seat. But she had the fight. But we're even just seeing that pour over into the suburbs as well. I live in Crystal, and just seeing that come out, that crime pour out, and it's just the same thing where we're pushing far to the left with our city council, our school board.
I think part of it is part of it's kind of the Trump derangement syndrome where people
Yeah.
have just been like the steady drumbeat that we've had for the last
Right.
10 years, basically, of, this person's evil and anyone who even smiles at him is evil. That's kind of been a steady drumbeat. So for a lot of people, the allure of socialism, when they haven't been taught in schools the true history of the world, that's another huge element that I think factors into it. How do you combat that? And people,
Right.
young people that don't know the evils of socialism, they just think, oh, free stuff, and I've got all these rights and I can do what I want.
Yep.
They don't see the dark path that sends humanity down. And
Right.
again, until enough other people get out and vote against it. But when you don't have a whole lot of choices, that's another issue as well.
And when you don't have that educational piece with socialism, really what is the history of socialism? We always think, oh, it's going to work out. We've seen, it's never been truly tried out. We have so many examples,
So tight with that.
Russia, of course, Cuba, Venezuela, where inflation is just crazy, and
Right.
what's going on in Venezuela is going to come to the U.S. if we let it.
Right, and I think that Republican brand, if you will, right, wrong, or indifferent, you're always told, the old adage, right, is that people care about pocketbook issues. They care about they do care about the cost of food. They care about crime. They care about how much their health insurance costs, right? And it's fascinating that you bring that up, Diane, because like if it's the Trump thing, if it's the abortion issue, right, which is even feeding down into county commission races and
Yeah.
city council races where abortion is a literal non-issue, I'm just fascinated that people seem to vote against their own perceived best self-interest
Right.
because of Trump, or my city council person is going to take away my right to choose an abortion. It's like, what is going on right now?
Yeah. Well, and even watching what happened in the legislature this past session with the abortion debate and just, I stayed up until 2 a.m. and I watched the debate on the House floor and I just thought, how is this even happening? That there was just not even a millimeter was given
Right.
by the Democrats for anything. And you would think most reasonable people, although I don't think most reasonable people saw that aspect of it, as we know our media does not cover.
Yeah, they don't do us any
cover it.
favors.
So
Yep.
that's another big issue that we have to fight against is people don't actually know what's happening in the legislature or in the city or in the state because our local media isn't telling them the truth.
Well, and I think it's important to acknowledge too that none of us who are sitting here are lamenting, right?
No.
We don't have time to lament, what has already happened. It's more just stating, what actually we face as Republicans, not only in Minnesota, but it seems across the country.
And not only what we face as Republicans, but what we face as Minnesotans and Americans.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're not voting for ourselves. We're voting for everybody when it comes to education, when it comes to crime. I moved out of Minneapolis, but I still want to see that city become the beautiful city I believe it truly was.
Well, and you mentioned ranked choice voting
Yeah.
too, Jen.
Yeah.
Just even the fact that got so, in a suburb like Eden Prairie, it got so resoundingly defeated. Put your mind in the mind of that average voter. Ranked choice voting is this confusing albatross around our election system. Why are people compelled to do that?
They make it sound fair. They say everyone has the fair play.
Right.
Everyone, it brings out your person who might not be recognized by the Democrat, Republican, or marijuana party. So, hey, ranked choice voting, everyone gets equal playing field. The reality, it doesn't. And as you said, it's confusing, and tabulating the results takes forever. It's just having that expertise to do that, where with what we have currently at the statewide and nationwide, we can look at the votes and say, okay, who's the clear winner here?
Right. I don't think that feeds confidence in our system. The fact that tabulating votes takes so long in ranked choice voting. Minneapolis, the classic example where it's like you vote, and then they tell you, hey, we'll know in 6 days
Yeah.
what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't make sense. But again, it goes back to the candy coating, the sugar coating of bad ideas, and people don't understand the consequences and the ramifications of ranked choice voting because it's made to sound so appealing and so fair, which, leads me into the whole equity. Everything is about equity now, and so we see that everywhere we
another
go.
word that-
That needs
my
to be
goodness.
banned. Because again, people don't understand what it means, and what we're really striving for is equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome, which is what equity really is. We're never going to have that, but we're being told over and over again that that's what we want. And if
Right.
enough people don't know the difference, then that's where it leaves us as that's what we get.
And that's what ranked choice voting tries to point out, that
Yes.
everyone gets, that equal opportunity. At the end of the day, you're going to be backed by some party or backed by some big donor. I mean,
Right.
it doesn't matter if you have the Democrat, Republican, legalized marijuana, whatever's behind you. At some point, a couple people are going to have, the top ranking.
Right. Well, I'm convinced too that ranked choice voting is a Democrat turnout operation, right? Because you're
100%.
getting 6 different flavors of Democrat on your ballot,
Right.
and then like maybe like one more reasonable candidate. And if the socialist is your first choice, well, the semi-socialist is going to be your second choice, and then maybe I can hold my nose and vote for like the semi-communist. It seems like that's the calculation.
Right.
Yep,
right.
yep. The person who's, okay, this person's way far out there. We always have the pirate guy in Minneapolis who, I don't know if Jack Sparrow ran
yeah,
this
Jack,
time.
Jack Sparrow. Yes.
Nice guy. I've legit met him in real life.
Right.
But, what I mean? He runs, he has the money too, and puts his name on the ballot.
As Jack Sparrow.
As Jack,
that's,
right.
Yep.
That's great. That's great. Well, Diane, you mentioned like the equity issue, and I think like that's something you kind of been on the front lines in fighting through the various organizations you're part of. What does that fight look like? Is it just an education, or where are we seeing this kind of like nefarious word pop up?
It's everywhere. It's in the financial system. It's in all advertising. It's in home mortgages. It's in going to the grocery store. Everywhere I look, someone is talking about what's equitable, what's sustainable, and I'm starting to feel like people they throw that word out, and it's like, I don't think that word doesn't mean what you think it means, right? Like, I don't think
Sustainable
you
being
really,
the other one.
right? But again, I think that's part of a larger push to kind of deflect from actual history, deflect from the principles that our country was actually founded on, and to just kind of either get people angry or get people complacent to think,
Right.
so that they become more dependent on the government.
Right.
And it does both things, that whole equity, and I hate to use the word agenda because that's another word I'm like not very fond
There's
of
a lot of
these
words
days.
we're
There's
annoyed. There's a lot of words we're annoyed with right now.
I know.
Learning that.
Yes.
List
yes.
of banned words for
Yeah,
Republicans
yeah.
at this point.
We're running out of lexicon.
But I think all we can do really is just kind of push back as best we can. Talk to our neighbors, talk to our friends, and just be more educated about what these things really are. Run for city council, run for school board. It's tough. It's not an easy fight, but we have to fight it.
And I think one thing that's just crazy is that we've talked about a few different things where it's like almost it is really this kind of radical agenda, and with the voter, you're not seeing this, at least so far, you're not seeing this kind of paradigm shift, and I'm wondering about like how like confident are you guys about what can happen here in Minnesota? Because there was just a poll that came out like a week and a half ago that had Donald Trump down in Minnesota by like 1 point. So I see that, and I see, what's happened the last few election cycles. Like, do you see opportunity? I mean,
I hope so. I mean, part of me wants to keep that optimistic view. Like, yes, we can take back this state, but we didn't see it in 2022 with Scott Jensen, who I thought fought the good fight when it came to running for governor, and just came up short. Keith Ellison was reelected, which everything he does, I'm just like, how can we reelect it? Even that guy alone, like, just bugged me. But I'd like to think so, but we have a lot of new voters coming in, and It's people who are, gaining citizenship, learning about Minnesota, learning about America, and they're being told stuff straight away by the Democrats. And they're like,
Right.
democracy is this, we're for equity, and we're for making sure you have an equal chance, and we want to get you on our government programs. Well, Republicans are really like, we know you came to America for a reason. As you said, our founding principles. We want you to find your way, really truly learn and be part of this country. Unfortunately, they're not getting that messaging. They're getting straight from the Democrat and the socialistic point of views.
I think it's, everybody has a pain point, right? And so until people hit that pain point, I mean, we went through COVID and everybody was like sitting at home getting checks and like,
That's
hey,
true. Yep.
life is great, and now we're still climbing out of that hole. And it's like addiction, like people aren't going to change until they're ready to change. So something's drastic, I think, is going to have to happen, and I don't know what that is. But that doesn't mean that we can't reach out to new immigrants or young people, as a party, and talk to them. And I think there are more and more young people who are becoming more engaged in politics, and I think they're not necessarily buying what the Democrats are selling.
Yeah, seems like talking about that pain level, that our pain levels must be pretty high in Minnesota, because you brought up specifically like Keith Ellison getting reelected.
Yes.
Diving deep into the numbers, one thing that was interesting is you had places like Edina, where when Keith Ellison ran the first time in 2018, Edina was almost split, on Keith Ellison. I think Keith won by a point or two in a place like Edina. And then this past election, where he was on the ballot, won by like 14 points in Edina. It was like that dramatic.
Yeah, wow.
And I'm fascinated by this kind of metro mentality that allows us to keep making the same
choices.
Same choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again.
Right.
And expecting different results.
Different results.
Exactly.
Different results.
Yeah.
And with Edina, we've just seen some of the crime like skyrocket there too. I believe there was just a stabbing or shooting right by the,
Yeah, I saw that.
Southdale Mall.
Yes. Yeah, a guy was murdered, I think. I think the
Yeah.
man was killed. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and again, the number of carjackings that were reported in the last few years in Edina specifically. And you wonder, what are people thinking that they don't, do they feel like they're powerless? Do they feel some sort of guilt? I mean, I think there's a lot of guilt shaming, guilt tripping that happens for people, especially with minority communities, that, well, it's my fault because I'm white and therefore I can't say anything, or, and it's garbage.
Well, with you running in Minneapolis, well, you both ran in Minneapolis, and with Sean being so involved with the Minneapolis GOP, I'm wondering, what are some of those trigger point issues that we can capitalize on? What are people open and receptive to in the population centers that we need to win if we're ever going to win the state? I mean, what are things you guys hear about?
I think crime is number one, but again, we saw that didn't necessarily move the needle very much. But I think it's just getting out and talking to people and saying, so what's on your mind, or what are you concerned about? So finding out what people are concerned about, having good data about what people are concerned about is a huge issue, and that's really where we have to start.
I think really we as Republicans, we also have to come up with answers. So we can't just say crime, education, taxes. We have to come up with solutions as well, or help our candidates come up with those solutions. So if we get them elected, we have real choices. So hey, we know your taxes keep going up, or I think we were talking even before the show about garbage fees, recycling fees going up. Can we come up with better solutions to present that to voters, whether they're at city council, county level, state, or national?
Yeah, it's interesting with the organized trash issue. I remember a few cycles back, a few years ago, when Chad Anderson ran down here in a special election in Bloomington and won. And it was just based on educating in a special election, so lower turnout, and you can control the outcome a little bit better. Just educating people on what organized trash collection was. And with that issue specifically, it was like between that and going back to ranked choice voting, how ranked choice voting was almost voted down here
Yeah.
in Bloomington.
Yeah.
And then to see the result, like I said before, in Eden Prairie, where it was like, not that close, I was like, man, what happened on an issue like that? Just very interesting. We had talked a little bit off camera about the surplus or lack
Yes.
of surplus that is coming down the pipe, and it's like we had this. Diane mentioned COVID before. We had all this federal money flood in, and so we had the $17 billion surplus, and then that became a supposed $2 billion surplus that we're going to have this year, and now they're saying in 2026 we're going to probably run a deficit, and I think it's hilarious that it's like, hey, you balloon the budget 100%. That money's not
Yes.
going to be there forever. You mentioned something off camera, Diane, where it was like these Democrats that got elected seem to be in lockstep this past session. There
was no pushback from anyone on anything, which I just find bizarre.
And there are Democrats in moderate districts that just went full bore on this radical left agenda.
Yeah.
I find that fascinating because I could never imagine a one-seat majority Republican. You're going to have some kind of difference or dissent or what have you.
Right.
We argue with each other. I mean, look at the national level that's going on right
By
now.
the way, as we record this, there's a debate happening. There's a presidential debate happening.
I know.
So, what good Republicans we are, that we're sitting here.
We'll catch it.
Yeah.
We'll
Get the
catch
highlights
the highlights.
on Twitter or
Yeah,
X
yeah.
now. But I just, I'm fascinated by that mentality of like, with a one-seat majority, slim majority, that you just are so dedicated to your ideological cause that I wonder what drives that. I wonder what gave them that confidence.
And I wonder if we're going to see that pushback in the next 2024 election, if some of them can get voted out, if their constituents are saying, wait a second, you went way too far left versus, working for us.
Well, and again, I think it goes back to what people are learning, what they're hearing about. I heard a statistic, or not a statistic, kind of anecdotally, that X is basically Portland, Oregon. So that's where a lot of people get their news from, and so even policymakers are listening to what's happening on Twitter and watching that instead of seeing that that's just a tiny fraction of the whole population and our whole society. They're just basing everything, I think, for popularity points. And so until we can change that mindset, and I think Elon Musk is doing a good job of kind of changing the way we talk about things or how we learn things. He's not the only one, but I think that's like we have to have a big sea change in how we interact with each other as a society, as human beings, as we, how do you interact with people that you see in the grocery store? Are you friendly? Are you afraid? There's a lot of, this climate change thing is another thing that's been kind of shoved down our throats with little to no evidence, but people are terrified. Yeah. And when you scare a population and you keep them in the dark, you can pretty much, have your way with them. They'll do anything you say.
Right. Yeah, I saw a recent story that we're supposed to be worried about this big hole in the sun. A solar flare happened because of climate change, apparently. I guess we can affect the sun itself now.
How powerful we are.
We are, so we're all powerful.
I was going to say, is that from all the airplanes, or is that from eating beef, or what's that coming from?
Yeah, it's probably the fact that we don't recycle, maybe.
That's it.
We ripped a hole in the sun now. So that's what we're supposed to be accountable for.
It's right. Yep, it's all our fault, and no going back. So
yeah.
We have a couple minutes left, so what's the last thing we want to touch on here?
Oh my goodness.
I know, it's host, we're always the one asking the questions.
Right.
And
What do we think about the new state flag? What about that whole debacle?
I will say about the state seal, I don't hate it.
yeah,
It's
You
not-
saw that? The
Yeah.
balloon's not bad,
It's
right?
not bad.
cute.
It's not
It's
bad.
cute.
And I heard a teacher say, why don't we have something that teaches kids history that they can relate to? Well, I'm pretty sure we had that for a
that
long
was the
time.
flag. Yeah.
Exactly,
So-
and that became racist.
Yeah, because everything
history.
is racist.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, who knows what the flag will look like?
I was all for the loons shooting lasers. I don't know how you guys felt, but I would have been proud to
Saw
make
that
that my
one.
flag.
I saw that
If we
one.
can't
My
pick 'em.
submission to the state flag contest was Al Franken groping that woman. I just thought if we slap that on the state
On the
flag,
state
that might be an appropriate That might be appropriately represent us, you know.
It's Minnesota history.
I was going to say, yeah,
true.
kids
True.
would understand it, you know.
Yeah.
But also, like, you know, and I know we're running short on time, but if that demonization of history, like, that really is the problem of our time, I think.
Yes.
You know, because from that, I feel like that's where, like, the anti-free speech stuff flows. It's
Yes.
like we can't speak freely because we're a horrible nation with a horrible past. Bothers me a lot.
Oh, bothers me too. And, you know, you would think with all the self-help of, you know, that we went through in the 80s and 90s, and, you know, be free to speak, and now all of a sudden, you know, we're all being stifled, so.
Yeah, it's just this, let's change it if, you know, it gets too offensive to anybody. But
Right.
at what point is it not offensive?
Well, and even like what you're seeing on the national level, like with the Israeli conflict,
Yes.
and then you have these university professors coming out and saying kill Jews is not harassment.
Right.
That's wild.
That is beyond wild.
And it doesn't matter, you know, Jews, Palestinians, you know, you can't, this isn't a race thing, and we can't make it that and, you know, call for the extermination of a certain group of people. And we're seeing that, you know.
Right. Well, and I think
Yeah.
too on college campuses, it's like
Yes.
if you're for free speech absolutism, you know, which I think we all are. It's like, okay, if you want to go fly your Nazi flag on campus, that's fine. But they're kicking like Ben Shapiro off of campuses for saying like a man can't be a woman.
Right, right.
Yep.
What do you do?
They used to be, you know, places to have that discussion, places to have that education, and we're losing that quick.
Yeah, we are. We are. Well, this has been a great discussion.
This has been a great
I mean,
discussion.
We could go for another half an hour, I suppose, but
You know, being in the middle of you two, I was like, yeah, this is cool. This is me, like, getting it all in. And
we should do it again.
I think we should.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, Jen, do you want to close this up then?
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on Republican Roundtable. Feel free to put your comments however you view us, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, or Rumble. We are also on public access, which you can't put comments on, but you can find us on those other social media platforms if you want to comment on this. And we look forward to seeing you again next time.